Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight. I'm Mike Kenichi. I'm very happy tonight because I have a guest that I've known for a very long time. He's an outstanding coach. He's been coaching high school football since 1995, and he is currently the new head football coach of the Seymour Football Wildcats. It is my honor to introduce to you Mr. Dan Dunaj. And Dan, I want to thank you for coming on today, and congratulations on the new opportunity.
Thank you, Mike. Great to hear it, and nice to see you.
You as well. So, Dan, I think the first thing I want to ask you is so people could get a little background on you. You played football for Derby High School between the seasons of 1987 and 1989, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And, that was a great time in Derby football. I mean, they were winning Housatonic championships. They won a state title. They really, the 70s, they had a great run as well. But in the 80s, I mean, they were the cream of the crop in the Hoosie, them, Shelton, Cheshire. I mean, just a great program. So talk about your time at Derby High School.
Well, it was to be honest with you, it was fantastic. A lot of people talk about, wanting to get out of high school. And yeah, at some point, I think I didn't want to leave. My friends, we had such a great time, obviously the football games were great, thousands of people at the games and these big games and, what led up to it. And, the old Valley of the Evening Sentinel and Valley cable games and, your relatives gathered around a TV on Sunday night and watching the games together. And, it was a great time to be involved in Valley football.
Yeah. And Dan, you grew up, it's always been a running joke forever in Derby, but it's really not a joke. You grew up on the west side of Derby, and those west side boys really took, pride in, playing football games every day in the backyard, doing things like that. But I mean, really, those kids lived for not only going to the football games, but playing every day after school. And then, of course, playing Pop Warner.
Yeah. I mean, growing up, I couldn't trade anything in the world for where I grew up and who I grew up with. People like Mike Giannetti, Chris Anderson, Mark Angeletti, Buff Bartone, Tony Piccirillo, Ron Bartone lived across the street from me. We had such a great neighborhood. And, any chance we could play anything. It wasn't just football. We would play street hockey. We would play basketball. We would play baseball, hide and seek. It didn't matter. We were always outside running around and, having a good time playing together.
Yeah. And Dan, we got a glimpse back then. I mean, again, I was a young kid, but we got a good glimpse of the work ethic that you would put in that, you've continued to do in 2024. But back then, you were so determined to find your way on that football field. And by senior year, you were rotating at defensive back. You were one of Mr. Alu's favorite, defensive backs on that team. And I mean, you really worked hard because it wasn't easy because there was so much talent in Derby back then that you really had to put in the extra work to get a spot on that roster.
Yeah, growing up, my parents were really, really big in my life about hard work. My mom was, a nurse, and my dad was a teacher, football coach, and my uncle Timmy Conlin, who lived next door to us. They always strived. My grandmother, everyone was like hard work, hard work, hard work. But everyone was, that was the culture back then. And like you said, there was some great talent. I mean, we had Jeff Owens, Steve Pizzato, Jason Palmieri, Johnny and Roman, Joe Martin, Chris, my junior year. And, we just had so many kids that were talented at that position, and even to this day, I see all the guys and, they're all doing great. And, they taught me a lot of life lessons coming through, never to give up, stay the course. And, I've taken those with me the rest of my life.
Right. And 4 victories during your career, Dan, that stand out to me. I'll start with your sophomore year. You guys, Charlie DeCenzo had not defeated Shelton in his career as a head coach. And you guys went out there that day, a heavy underdog, and you guys defeated them 33-7. Greg Patnella had the game of his life. I mean, he was unbelievable. Tony Piccirillo had a great game at quarterback, and you guys beat them. Talk about just as a kid who was a sophomore on that team to experience something like that on Thanksgiving Day.
Oh, it was phenomenal. I mean, we had a very good team that year. I mean, we were top 10 in the state. Don't quote me on where we were. So that was like a clash of the Titans. Shelton came in undefeated, and we won the Hoosie that year. we opened up with Seymour, and I think we won in the pouring rain. I think it was 14-12. It was a really tight game. And, that just growing up and being around those type of guys on a daily basis, they really brought out the best in you. And, you look back at it, and there was a lot of high school shenanigans that you had, and, your rites of passage of going through the team. But, it was priceless. I remember a practice that year, and I was small. I was a sophomore on the scout team, and I forgot what week it was, but Nick Rizzio, who was much bigger than I was the fullback, and he had to run like a play where he had to block me like 4 times in a row because Charlie was like running again. We weren't doing it right, and I was probably concussed. I was, wobbly at the knees, and every time he would help me up. Hey, keep up the good work. It was never anything, animosity. Everything was such a brotherhood that, we all picked each other up. I mean, Greg Pettinella was Chris King that year, Jamie Gagnon, all those guys. Yeah. You'd be playing in the scout team secondary, and they would torch you because they were so much faster. And then they would say, "Hey, man, turn this way, turn that way." So they were always helping out. Derby was a brotherhood, and to this day, it still is.
Yeah, it really was. And you mentioned Chris Anderson, Mark Angeletti, and another game that stands out to me was your junior year, and that was a Sunday afternoon at Ryan Field against arch rival Ansonia, and you guys pulled off a 10-7 upset. Again, Chris had a phenomenal game in the secondary. That whole entire team just played so well that day. Chris Gradadoria had a very good game as well that day.
Yeah, solid performance.
He kept Ansonia's defense off the field. He made sure he managed the game well. And, it was just a great team win. But, I think every kid, when they're playing for Derby back then, they wanted to beat Ansonia. That's always something you want to do. So talk about getting to have that moment where you guys defeated them.
Derby and Sonia, was like sort of like Alabama Auburn, the Iron Bowl. It was two teams like right next to each other. For all intents and purposes, you were in the same town. They're only miles apart. And, great rivalry, great tradition in that game. Leading up to that game, that week was phenomenal. We had such a focused week of practice. Mark Angeletti, Chris Andrews, Kevin Burns was a captain. Kevin Burns was a great leader, great player, great human. And, those guys got us going in the right direction. And, my class was the year behind them, but our kids, everybody bought in. And, I'll never forget when I was driving to the field. I was going by the old, coming down by the hospital where the Route 8 underpass is. And the cheerleaders put Crush, Kill, Destroy Ansonia banner drop down from the highway. Back then it wasn't just the players; it was the community. Like everybody and their grandmother, literally, wanted to go to that game, and obviously wanted to win. Someone's got to win, but what a great game. Coach DeCenzo and his staff had a great game plan. We were 3 yards in a cloud of dust that kept their explosive offense off the field, and we came down, and Steve Buzz came down and kicked the winning field goal. And, everybody celebrates.
Yeah.
Epic game.
Yeah, it really was a great Derby victory. Especially the NFL was huge, and nobody cared about the NFL in the Valley that day. It was Derby and Ansonia. So
and Ansonia had a great team.
Yes.
They had kids who played in college, major D1. Armando Stallings played for the Bengals. Yeah. They had a phenomenal team too.
Yeah, they definitely did. And another program that's always been well coached. So it was a great 2 well coached teams and 2 well two-way athletes out there. But Dan, 2 games your senior year that were very important to Derby football. Number 1 was the game against Seymour, because you guys were 4-3 at the time, and you needed that win to give Derby another consecutive 500 or better season. And you guys were, it was kind of like at that point, you guys were still trying to get over that hump and win that big game that year, because you had a couple losses early in the year that, nobody expected, especially a loss to Brantford. But you guys came out that day, you were down, I think 15-0, but you guys persevered. And then that fourth quarter, just a phenomenal fourth quarter by the entire team. And you had a nice come from behind 16-15 win.
Yeah. Great game. Great atmosphere, Valley atmosphere. Seymour had a pretty much identical record. I don't know if it was exactly the same, but it was around the same, and very similar to us the year before. The class, the '88 season. So Chris Mule and Kevin Burns' senior year. We lost a lot of leadership that year. We lost a lot of players, but we returned some good players. And Seymour was in the same boat. I mean, they lost the Elliots, they lost Gross, they lost Tanner. They lost some good kids too, but they had a lot of talent. They had the Presti, they had Connick, they had Moroni Burchell, Cacciello. They had some really good players and some good young players. Paul Sponheimer, great coaching staff. Those were battles too. And, that game was great. I mean, we lost some close games. And, looking back at it, maybe, we could have, ball goes one way for us. We might have won one of those games. We lost the opener to Cheshire. I think it was 15 or 18 to 10. It was a close game. It was within the score. Don't quote me on the score, but, and they ended up going to the state championship that year. They were pretty good. And, they sort of snuck up on us looking back at it, but, we found ourselves that day and, everybody played hard. Mike Giannetti probably had arguably one of the biggest momentum plays I've ever seen when they came down to kick a field goal and which would have clinched it.
Yeah.
And he blocked it, and the play before I dropped the pick six, which I'll never forget. And no one will ever let me forget, but, it was a great game, physical Valley game. And, everybody got their money's worth.
Yeah, it was a great game. And then you wouldn't think you could follow something up like that after having an emotional win. But the following week on a Friday night, I think it was
North Haven.
Well, North Haven was 8-0 going into that game. And you guys had that streak on them. I think Derby at that point had a 25-game winning streak. So North Haven was hungry to get a victory. And, I mean, you guys were 5-3. They were 8-0. And what a tremendous victory that night. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. We rode a little momentum going into that. I think we sort of found ourselves as far as, hey, man, we're not a bad team. We're actually a pretty good team. We just, weren't there yet. And, every season is different. And the season before we played North Haven, they were up 14-0 at halftime. Anderson returns the opening kickoff. And then, we end up beating them. We shut them out in the second half, beat them 21-14. And they had the bulk of their returners back. They had this phenomenal receiver, defensive back, Max Joyner Brown, I believe his name was. He played at UNH. Great player. They were big. But, Charlie got us ready. We played, Derby football. We weren't, the more talented than them. I mean, as a coach now, you look back at some of the games, you say, how do we even win these? I mean, these teams were huge. They had fast people. But we just had tough kids and, they were no-limit soldiers. Coach said, we're going to block. And, didn't matter how big they were or strong they were. We're going to tackle. And, we just had that mindset that we could do anything coming down the stairs out of that field house. And, greatest feeling in the world. Come on down there, win a game, and, everything comes to fruition that you worked hard for during the week.
Yeah, most definitely. And let me ask you, Dan, we're going to talk about your coaching career in a second, but as you got into coaching, I'm sure you took some things you learned from that Derby coaching staff that you carried over with you throughout your coaching career, because you, as a player, you probably learned so much about the game of football from those guys.
Yeah. The coaching staff at Derby, I mean, well, to be honest with you, back then it started in Pop Warner. I mean, they made us tough. They didn't hold our hand. They made us survive per se. And, I remember they had this hill we used to run in Pop Warner that was all jagged edges and rocks. And people come on with scrapes and, do it again. Do this right in practice or we're going to the hill. And, and then when you got in high school, we were prepared for that. So, our Pop Warner program back then, we weren't really a highly successful Pop Warner program as far as wins and losses go when I look back at it. But, it taught us the mentality, the grit, the toughness you need to play football. And then you get into high school and, phenomenal coaching staff, Charlie and Frank Allu and Johnny D. And, and then we go and play those games and, practices were harder than the games. They didn't take it easy on us. So, if there's one thing that I really got from high school, it was that, if you work hard and you're tougher than other people and you're not tougher like fight them, but tougher in the fact that you could endure more, you're going to be successful in anything you do. And I've taken that with me everywhere. I mean, even in school when I was in college, there were some tough classes. Say, if I could get through a football practice, I could get through this course, and I think that's a valuable lesson for our kids now too.
Right, definitely. So let me ask you, Dan. I mentioned it earlier, and I could be wrong, and I apologize if I am. Was your first coaching experience in 1995 when you helped Chris, the freshman team at Shelton High School?
Yeah. Ironically, I the week before that, I was in Florida. I went down with Chris Benanto, Eddie Calvert, Pat McMahon, my brother Mike, and we went down there and we stayed at Chris Benanto's dad's timeshare, and we had a great time. We drove down in a Jeep with no top, drove back, got home at like 4 a.m. My mom was working in the jail, so she got home at like, I don't know, midnight. She was home. She waited up for us, cooked us breakfast, and we're eating breakfast. And in my parents' kitchen, which is on the first floor, there's a screen, and Mark Angeletti's banging on the screen at like 4:30 in the morning. Hey, what are you guys doing? And we're like, no, we just got back from Florida. He goes, well, go home, make sure you get some rest because we got a coaches meeting at 5 o'clock on your front porch. And I go, what are you talking about? No clue what he was even talking about. And he said, no, Chris got hired as the freshman coach. We're all going to coach with him. And, I called Chris later on. He was obviously sleeping at that point, but, and that's it. So me, him, Pete Sackey, Mark, the four of us, we were the Shelton High School freshman coaches that year.
Yeah, and talk about that because one thing about Chris, as we all know, I mean, he's very intense and he is going to give his very best. And really, like that first year, those Shelton kids saw a commitment out of the coaching staff and a dedication out of them that I think, a lot of them I talked to over the years always say that they were grateful for that experience playing for you guys. But talk about that first year being on that coaching staff.
Well, it was a learning experience because as much as, I was probably a junior in college and, I was going to be a PE teacher. So, you have your coach, your teaching classes to, work with kids and how to instruct and, but, I didn't know all the X's and O's yet. I didn't even know where I would pan out as a coach. Am I an offense coach, a defensive coach, quarterbacks coach, a linebackers coach? I didn't know where I was, and, Chris is very driven. Chris is very focused, as you know, and, Chris had a plan and we sat down, we put the plan together and we went forward with it. And, the one thing I could say that we bought, and those kids will agree, is we bought a lot of intensity. And, where we lacked as X's and O's, we got out of them in effort. And, that panned out for those kids in Shelton's program down the road. It panned out to be great for them. They ended up having a very successful year, that freshman class, throughout that program.
Right. And then I think the following year, Dan, the team that you guys coached with Chris went undefeated, correct? Went 11-0, that freshman team.
Yeah, we were blessed with a little more talent than the year before. Not much more, but a little more. We had a couple more better skill kids, but and we started getting our bearings. Like I said, I had never coached before. I've only been a player, so you sort of take what you know as a player and you apply it. But we were very fortunate because that Shelton's varsity staff had some great coaches on it. Joe Benanto obviously is a legend. And, when you get hired and you're a rookie and the first person you could pick a brain from is Joe Benanto, you're blessed. That was also Jeff Roy's first year.
Yeah.
It's his first year as a defensive backs coach. I mean, you had all these guys in your back pocket. So whenever your back was against the wall or you were confused, you could always pull one of those guys over. Mike Dokla, who still does the booth to them to this day. I talk to him all the time. We always talk some football. I mean, we're always evolving and moving and thinking. And, that's how it was there. And, to come into that was special because, if I landed somewhere else for my first coaching job and it wasn't surrounded by those people, you never know where things would have went.
Yeah, definitely. So was it 1998? I know that's the year Seymour won the state title, but was that your first year on the Seymour staff or did you come there in 97? Second year?
Second. My first year was, I believe, was the 97 season. Getting a little old, Mike, so don't quote me on all the years here, but I'm pretty sure it was 97. And ironically, I was coaching at Shelton and Chris got moved up to the varsity, Chris and Mark.
Yeah.
And Pete Sackey left coaching for the bit. And, it was me and Tony Branca. And I was going to coach with Tony Branca. And then my aunt, Kim Conlon, called me up and said, hey, I know you're a senior in college. You're looking for some gigs for some money. And they had a weightlifting job open, and I went and applied for it. And then me and Spoonie hit it off, and then that was history from there. And I coached there the 97 year. I was the JV coach and the / freshman coach and the varsity linebackers coach. And, it was fun. And again, I'm blessed because now I get dropped from a Joe Bonanto staff into a Paul Sponheimer staff.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's like having an encyclopedia. It's like the modern version of Google. You could just hit anything, and you got all these guys. When you get into a jam, Eric DeMarco, like Bob Kello, Matt Cacciello, those guys were awesome.
Yeah.
Ray Nappy, coach with me, Bodman, Ray Nappy was awesome. I grew up with Ray Nappy. His mom and my mom were cheerleaders together at Derby High School. Like it's all like fate, my coaching story.
Yeah, it really is. And think about this. Your first year at Shelton on the freshman staff, the varsity wins a state title.
Yeah.
Your second year at Seymour, the varsity wins a state title. So, I mean, you got to experience a lot of winning early in your coaching career that I think, it just makes a coach even more determined when he sees that they're winning like that. He wants to make sure the train keeps going.
Well, not only that, but you see how it's done the right way. Because, you look around even to this day in high school football, there's a lot of good athletes on teams, but, only certain teams, the coaches put it all together. And, to be around those guys is, that's like getting a master's or doctorate education in coaching, being around those guys. They just had every answer, and whether it was managing kids or whether it was strategy, game preparation, they just had all the answers. And you're like a sponge because you love doing what you do. So you're absorbing everything and, it sticks.
Yeah. And Dan, one of the things, you're coaching at the time, so I'm sure you're not always paying attention to this stuff, but I can remember Coach Sponheimer when they were doing the Valley kickoff and they're asking him about his coaching staff. And he made it a point to mention you and say how you are going to be an outstanding coach someday, that the work ethic you put in and things like that. And to have praise from somebody like a legend like Spoonie like that, to believe in you. And then he eventually, I think in 2001 or 2002, made you the defensive coordinator. So, I mean, he believed in you right from the start because he could just see the commitment that you were putting in.
Well, Coach and I have a great relationship. I talk to him probably like every 2-3 weeks. We get together. He's doing great. He's got his 2 grandkids. He's enjoying life. He's retired, or so he says he is. He's still, the mayor, running around shaking hands, kissing babies, and doing Spoonie stuff. But Paul's great. We connected right off the bat. We had a lot of things in common personality wise that made us pretty close pretty quick. We had a lot of the same views and philosophies, old school type mentality and hard work and, being there for the kids. Paul's a great mentor, not just to me, but, coaching over at Seymour, I'm back now. But even then, I didn't really know a lot of the Seymour people, but just to hear them talk about him and how he helps everyone with everything, it could be anything, literally. If someone was moving, he'll say, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll call a couple players, help you out." I mean, anything he could do to help, I try to emulate that. He's just, that was one of his greatest assets. And, when you get a guy that's looking to do that for you, you're looking to do more for him, and I think that's how humans operate. And, it was great to be around him, and, it's great to still talk to him and keep in touch with him.
And I've never heard a kid talk negative about him. Any kid that's ever graduated, I think of a guy I know very well, and Jamie Burns, and you know him as well too. Jamie is so appreciative to what Spoonie did for him, not only as a player, but everyday life. And the thing of it is too, the thing that Spoonie does for his players once they graduate, when he was still coaching, you have lifetime access to the field house, to the practice field. During the games, you could be on the sidelines. He, always appreciates what you gave to him in those 4 years. And that's the payback by always letting you be around the program anytime you want.
Yeah. I mean, once a Wildcat, always a Wildcat. That's what he always used to say. And, it shows, I mean, his alumni support, even when I was back there in the early 2000s and the late 90s was phenomenal. And, not everybody gets that. And, he goes to every wedding, every stag, and he keeps in touch even to this day with the kids and, or not kids anymore, but, that's something that's special. And, I just, I hope I can semi live up to that because that's the biggest shoes to fill. He's the godfather of Seymour football.
Right. Dan, you mentioned about a weightlifting job you applied there, and you have done so many things with weightlifting. You did it at Seymour, you did it at Southern Connecticut, you did it at Shelton, Torrington. But let me ask you, before you even applied for that weightlifting job, did you like have a background with weightlifting, like when you were at Southern? I mean, because
Well, I graduated with a degree in exercise science, and to be honest with you, when I was graduating, even though I was coaching freshman football, at that point I wanted to be a college strength coach, and
right,
that's what I wanted to do, But then I ended up getting engaged and married, and I was like looking at paycheck stuff, and it was like, all right, man, I could chase this, but I don't know how this is going to work out. So I probably chose the safer road, but I ended up being a college strength coach down the road anyway. But you know, your weightlifting program is the backbone, especially nowadays. Your strength and conditioning program is your backbone to your program. And football, even then, was a year-round sport. It's not so much playing. We don't have spring football anymore, but if you try to get the kids in August and try to accomplish in 3 weeks before a game what you could accomplish from January to there, I mean, that's apples and watermelons. It's not even close, but just the stuff they learn, not just getting bigger and stronger, but, you get the team in there and they're learning team stuff. They're working together. You get a great chance to mentor them, check on their grades, make sure they're being good humans, those types of things, which are important. That goes overlooked, wins and losses sometimes. That's the backbone of your program. So if that's falling apart, unless you got great athletes, you're probably not having a good season.
yeah. And Dan, another coach, you mentioned him before, and you got to coach with him for, I would say 7 or 8 years, and that was Jeff Roy. You got to coach with Shelton, and you guys, that whole coaching staff and the players, you guys had a great run there. I mean, there was so much winning going on back then. I mean, winning the SCC a few times. I mean, going to states. You guys did a phenomenal job there. Just talk about your time at Shelton, because you also played a big part in the strength and conditioning program there. And they, a lot of those kids will credit you and that coaching staff for the amount of weightlifting they did. It was tremendous.
Well, ironically, when I resigned at Torrington, and I was probably a month out, my wife was pregnant, and I was like, okay, probably should slow down a little, and I got a call from Jeff Roy, and I was just sitting in my living room, and he wanted Chris Anderson's number because he wanted to talk some offense or something. And then he asked me what I was doing, and I was like, wow, nothing, I mean, I'm sort of trying to step back a little here. And he's like, well, you ever think about coaching again? And I said, yeah, well, I do. I says, I don't know, And he goes, why don't you come meet with me up Highland? So I went up Highland with him, and, we sat down and talked, and before you know it, I was coaching with him in spring football. And by the end of spring football, I was the defensive coordinator and the strength coach. So and it all worked out great. We had a great group of kids. Shelton's a phenomenal place. I love it. It's big football. They're all in. They're still one of those schools where you walk in on a Friday and all the lockers are decorated for the players. And, football's big there and it's important there. And because it is, they put out not only good players, but good people.
Yeah, they definitely do. And I've always said this, that I thought Coach Roy was one of the best coaches in the state. People don't realize how hard it is to win week in and week out when you're playing in the SCC like that. And 2 years in a row, you guys went undefeated in the SCC.
Yeah.
That really is a credit to him, his coaches, and his players. I mean, he was just, to me,
he's
very underrated coach.
Great head coach, great guy, great human, great friend. He, Jeff Roy's the type of guy that, if I called him tomorrow and said, hey, I need help with something, he'd help you out. He's a great guy. And, coaching for him, he was great. He was very open to ideas. He's a very intense guy. Again, it's another head coach I coached for that our personalities were very similar. And, we went back to my first time around at Shelton, and I saw him all the time in between. And, just a great relationship, and because of that, we had a lot of success.
Yeah, definitely. So Dan, your 5 years at Torrington, what I saw out of you as a head coach is that program got better each year. I mean, they had like, I think by the time you were there, I think they had at least 3 consecutive winning seasons. It might have been 4, but you could see right off the bat that the kids bought into what you and your coaches were doing, and you brought a couple Seymour guys with you. I'm pretty sure you brought Jamie and Joe Deptula, and
Yeah.
that was, it's always important because you want to surround yourself with good people. And I felt like that 5 years there at Torrington, you did a tremendous job. How did you feel you were as a head coach then? Because now you could kind of evaluate yourself a little better, but did you think then like there were still things you could work on as far as the game went?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Torrington's a different city, a different building than Shelton and Seymour. I mean, Seymour's different than Shelton. Shelton's different than Ansonia. I
Right.
mean, everybody's a little different, but I when I got the job up there, and it's funny how I got the job because at the time I wasn't looking to take the job, and I was the strength coach at Southern,
Yeah.
and I was getting my second master's, and I would bump into Jamie Burns in between my break all the time. And, I talked to him all the time, and, we hung out anyway. And he was telling me about that. And, hey, what do you think about that job? And I was like, I was sort of interested. So I threw my name in the ring, and, I ended up getting the job. And, I still teach there. And, it's a good place, but it is a little different. It's not the Valley per se, but, Torrington has a lot of tradition. Bruce Kazanets did a phenomenal job up there in the 80s, and they just had a little bit of a dip, and we were trying to climb them back up, and we were, but, when you still have to play some of the Valley powerhouses and you're trying to build a program, it's not an easy schedule. But, we won some games. We beat some good teams up there.
Yeah, you really did.
We accomplished a lot. We had Dean Sopanides, who went to play on in Iowa. We had Brendan Litton, who's still a top 5 or 6 all-time rusher in the state. So, we had some good players. We had a good little thing going.
Yeah, you definitely did. And Dan, it's funny. I can remember talking to you probably around 2001, 2002. And I always felt like you were going to replace Coach Sponheimer when he left. And then you had went to Southern, like you mentioned. So you started your head coaching career at Torrington. But I always felt in the back of my mind that someday that Seymour job would come open again, and hopefully you would go for it. And you were appointed the new head coach about a month ago. So just talk to me about how everything is full circle now, because now you are the head coach at Seymour. And I think, in my opinion, it was very important for you to someday be the coach at Seymour, especially with the friendship you had with Coach Sponheimer, knowing that he kind of looked at you as like a son, and now you're going to get to kind of be a part of a program that he built for so many years.
Well, I say this a lot to people. Like, when I left Shelton to come to Seymour, it was with a heavy heart because I really loved Shelton. I mean, the guy, John Niskey, who was the AD, was awesome. Scott Snell took the torch. I coached Scott Snell in track when I was coaching at Seymour way back, and his wife. I mean, like, I have a lot of Seymour connections, but, my home is Seymour. It's where my children put their head down at night to go to bed and dream about doing great things, and hopefully dream about doing great things. And, it's where I live. And, I just want to get us pointed in the right direction, and, compete for some championships down the road, and, build the program back up to where, Coach Sponheimer had it, which is going to be a tall feat because, in 2024, it's not the same. So, we're working hard every day, and, we're Wildcats, and we're working hard on being the best Wildcats we could be.
Right. So let me ask you this, Dan. When you were an assistant coach, obviously you could have a huge hand in the strength program, and you ran that. But as a head coach, can you do the head coaching and still be the main guy as far as strength and conditioning go, or are you going to have somebody else kind of take that on more, because you got a lot of responsibilities as the head coach?
Well, that's sort of a layered answer, but I coach them right now. Strength and conditioning. I do all of that. I probably won't stop doing that because number one, it's good for the kids to see the head coaches involved in that. if I had someone who I thought could do my job as good as me or better, I'd probably hire them, just because being a head coach, especially in 2024, even when I was a head coach at Torrington, there's more responsibility.
Yeah.
There's more, I won't necessarily just say paperwork, but formalities you have to make sure that you're doing that sidetrack you. And, being the head coach, you got a mentor, which is a whole different thing, checking grades and making sure every kid's head is where they're supposed to be in life, not just for football. And, I take pride in that. And, I'm probably not going to stop coaching the weightlifting.
Right.
It's the best way to connect with the kids too.
Right. So
now,
now
I'm not a stranger,
Right. So let's talk about the coaching staff. Have you put your full coaching staff together yet? I know it's only been a month, but do you have everybody?
I have not. I still have 1 or 2 more spots to fill, possibly 3 more spots with some volunteers that I'd like to get. But see, that's another thing. Like in 2024, I have to have someone who videos, because I can't just put an assistant coach on it, because we need the assistant coaches on the field. So it's a multi-layered thing, and it's all coming into play. But I have Jamie Burns is back, offensive line coach. Sean Wandell, who I went to high school with.
Oh, okay.
He was our defensive line coach last year. So Sean's back with us, and he'll be coach of the defensive line again. Brian Moore, who I coached in '97, my first year, he's going to be our offensive coordinator. And Brian coached probably 5 or 6 years in the 2000s, and now he's back, and I think he's going to do a phenomenal job. So just got to fill out maybe 2 more spots, and it's more important picking the right people than just picking someone. So I want to make sure it's a good fit and it's what we need. So I'm a little slow playing it in that respect, but it all comes by May. Everything should be settled up.
Right. And Dan, the numbers are obviously they will change once that first day of practice officially starts in August. But right now, how many kids would you say came to your first team meeting, if you had to give a number?
If I had to give a number of players that are on our team, by team, I mean coming to all our team functions right now, including weightlifting, I'd say we probably have about 34 to 36 kids.
Right.
Seymour's now a Class S school. Back my first time around, we were larger because we had Beacon Falls and Oxford.
Yeah.
So, there's enough kids. Hopefully we could get some more kids out. That always helps, but the kids we have are working hard every day. We lost a lot of starters from last year, but on both sides of the ball, but our talent well isn't dry. We just have to prove it. And I think, going through our conditioning program and going into the summer, we're going to be able to field a pretty good team.
Right. And Dan, years ago when you were coaching, you always had you had spring practice, which was always beneficial, especially to the young kids coming in. You could kind of introduce them to the system and stuff. They don't have spring practice anymore. Are you okay with that, or do you wish that was still something that you guys could have?
Well, again, it depends who you ask, Mike, because at Shelton, spring practice was great because you didn't lose a lot of players and if you did, you still had enough players if you lost kids to spring sports. In a Class S school, between track and baseball, if you tried to hold a spring practice and let's just say, 10 kids made it to the States for track and the baseball team was makes it to the second, third round of the playoffs, you might not have enough kids to actually run a practice because, that's how many kids play multiple sports, which they should. In a Class S school, you can't ask kids to just play one thing all the time. So, they gotta put on for their school and for their community. And, spring practice for us right now, it's not going to make or break us because now we also have a new rule in the CIAC that we get 2-hour practices per week in the summer.
Yeah.
And we could practice like block dummies, throw balls, like practice, not in pads, but, so it's our first time going through it, but I'm pretty sure by the time we get through all of that, I think, it'll be just as good as spring football.
Right. And
or at least it'll be serviceable as spring football.
Right. And Coach, you touched on this earlier too, about it wasn't just Derby High School that you learned a lot from. The Pop Warner program was very huge as well. So let me ask you, I know in Seymour, Pop Warner's always been big. Will you have a hand in Pop Warner a little bit as well? Because it's very important that the Pop Warner programs or AYF, whatever they are,
Well,
that
yeah, I'm hoping to
continue.
have a bigger one.
Yeah,
I got a plan. I'm hoping
yeah,
it comes to fruition. I've been deeply involved anyway because I've been coaching Pop Warner for the
yes,
past 3 or 4 years. I've been on the board, and I've met with a lot of the guys and talked some football with them. We have a lot of good coaches in Pop Warner. Parents obviously are your coaches, and the people who are there for the kids, not just for their kid getting a touchdown or put a picture on Facebook or so their hearts are in the right place. So I think we got all the right people, and I think within the next few years we could develop a really good feeder system.
right. So, Coach, obviously, listen, I know you're a competitor and you want to win, and that's always going to be your mindset and the kids' mindset. But for year one at Seymour High as head football coach, what is your main goal for the first season more than anything else?
Well, my first goal is, we want to build Wildcats. We want to build good humans, and I think that's a spoony thing. And when we do that, that takes care of a lot of the other stuff. So year one, we want to put in how we run things, how we practice, how we behave in school, how we carry ourselves in the community. We want to bring those things in. And again, once you have those things in place, it's easier to teach a kid a play. It's easier to, put in things for a game because now they understand where the effort, where the toughness, where the preparation, where it comes from and what it does. So, and we got ourselves in a pretty good direction. We had the NBL weightlifting competition 2 weeks ago, and, we finished third, finished in the top three. And Sonia and Naugatuck finished 1-2 respectively, and they're very good programs. So, like I said, our talent well isn't dry, but, we just got to get more seasoned, and we're well on our way doing that. So,
Right. Coach, I can't expect Coach Sponheimer at this stage of the game to want to coach anymore, but I do think it's important to have him around Seymour football because, I mean, these kids, it's very important that the kids remember, they know about the tradition, they know about the legacy, the past, and stuff like that. So, will you have him around the program at times this year? Because I
well,
feel like,
that's my plan. I've already mentioned to him. I says, hey, you're fully retired now. I got a job for you. And he was, hey, wait a second. And I was, no, here's your job. All I want you to do is just come to practice and shake hands and kiss babies and, be an extra set of eyes. What better set of eyes can I have? Watch your practice and give me ideas of how I can make it more efficient, and, like one of those, when I was coaching at Southern, they had the coach Ukrainian who won all the soccer national championships. And he had emeritus status. He had an office. He wasn't a coach. And all he did was just walk around and make things better. And, hope Paul's hearing me because that's what I would love for him to do. You don't have to be there every day. Just come and tell him a story about something that when we beat Ansonia or we won a big game and, inspire the kids and, groom along to be Wildcats. And, if we could do that, that'll help us tremendously. And, it's great for the community too.
right, it definitely is. And I really like that, now in the NBL, you've got Chris Anderson coaching, you've got Tommy Brockett, you've got yourself. I mean, you've got these guys coaching, and it's kind of sad to see Coach Stockmore go because he's been such a big part
Yeah.
of the Valley as well. But you're going to get a chance to coach against Chris, and you guys have been great friends forever. And that's the way it should be, though, because you guys have worked so hard for so many years that you guys. It's almost like you're proud of both each other that here you are in 2024. You guys played together, and now you guys are coaching high school football at the highest level. So that's something I think that's really great to see.
Yeah, it's special. I mean, Chris, my best friend, he's actually family, when you think about it. And he's my daughter's godfather. I'm his son's godfather. Our lives are intertwined forever. And, we talk almost on a daily basis. And, we do end up playing against each other. When he was coaching at Woodland, I coached 2 games against him. And, now I've coached 2 games against him at Naugatuck. And, we talk to each other leading up to the game. I mean, obviously we're not tilting any game plans, but, we talk about life, we talk about family, even if I have a football question, he'll answer it. Like if he has a question, he doesn't ask me a lot of football questions, but he'll ask me a weightlifting question, I'll answer it. We help each other out as best as we could. And, I want to see him be successful and he wants to see me be successful. And, that's our relationship.
Yeah. So coach, obviously you've always enjoyed coaching, whether, it was just as, defensive backs coach, defensive coordinator, as an assistant, briefly as a head coach. But let me ask you, so far, and it's only been like a month, are you enjoying this opportunity right now as head coach? I mean, it seems like to me you can't wait to get started.
Oh yeah, I'm really excited. To be a head coach in the town you live in, your home. I mean, not my hometown. Derby's my hometown, but to be at home, it's great. And I'll go into the grocery store. I'll see my Pop Warner players I coach. I'll say hi to them. It's great just to have that. In a small town, and that's what the experience I hope these kids get. I told the kids at practice the other day, says, we have some community service coming up where we got to do some town cleanup. And I was telling them that, this is our town. These are the people that come to your games. These are the people that you say hi to. These are the people who wave at you in a parade when you were a kid. Like you won't have that again. When you graduate, because you know, Mike, you're a little older, and, once you leave town, you don't see that. And, it's a special thing, but something you could always call home. And the Valley's always been home to me. So, it's a special thing. And I'm really excited about it. And, obviously I can't wait to get on the field, but, I still got to sort some things out before I do that. And, with age comes patience. So, we're working on everything we got to work on.
Well, Coach, I think the most impressive thing about today talking to you is what you just said a few minutes ago, and you brought it up a few times during the course of the interview, is football is a big part of it, but it's not just about being the head coach of the football team. You are teaching these kids, to love their town, to love their high school, to love their community and give back to it and help any way they can. And you're instilling that in them. And I think that's very important, because one thing that I think is always essential, and I brought it up a few minutes ago, is you have to, remember the tradition of your towns. That's always a big thing. And these kids live in Seymour, and they have to understand how important that town is to them.
Yeah. And, like football's all sports are relative. I firmly believe this. I get this conversation all the time, what's more important, what's harder, what's more competitive, whatever. It's all relative. But, football's a special sport because, when you talk about a community in a town, it's right when kids come back to school, it's the biggest event. And if it's done the right way, that spills into your building, it spills into your community. And, it's something everyone could rally around. It draws, because it's an outdoor venue, it draws a bigger crowd. It turns into an event. And, it's not always about winning and losing, which, teaches us a lot about life. But, all the little things leading up to those are what you really get about football. Like you talk about kids and, any football player, you interview all these people. We could talk about big games until the cows come home, but it's the stories they say, hey, one time in practice, this happened, or hey, me and my football buddies were hanging out here, so I tell the kids all the time. I mean, these are the kids, the people look around the locker room. These are the people that are going to be pallbearers at your mom's funeral. These are the people that will be your best men. These are going to be the people that, if you get kicked out of your house, you're crashing on their couch, this is it, and to get that kind of bond is a special thing. And that's what's special about football, not just to our program, but I'm sure in Sonia, Shelton, Derby, even, Naugatuck, we go on and on. They have that too. Valley's a special place.
Yeah, it most certainly is. Well, Coach, I want to thank you for giving me a few minutes today. I wish you nothing but the best, and it's so good to have you. You've been in high school football forever, but it's really good to have you back at Seymour and as the head coach, because I always felt like, you belong as a head coach. So I'm really excited to see how you're going to do, and I know you're going to give it your very best, and I wish you and your program the best of luck this season. Thank you for
Thanks,
giving.
Mike. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate all you do for high school athletics in the Valley, Mike. You do a great job. Keep it up. Keep it going.
Thank you, Coach. I appreciate it. And folks, of course, that's the head football coach of the Seymour Football Wildcats, Mr. Dan Dunaj. For In the Spotlight, I'm Mike Kenichi saying good night, everyone.